Hello and welcome to All the Things. I'm Krista Bontrager, also known as Theology Mom, and this is the show where we discuss all the things related to God, the Bible, and real life. Now, Monique and I have been rushing around this week trying to leave on a trip. We have a very busy traveling and speaking schedule for this fall. Make sure you go to centerforbiblicalunity.com and look on our events page to see if we are coming near you. We're going to be in New Jersey and in, I think, Indiana or something. And we are going to have a conference in Birmingham, Alabama. We're going to be in Dallas a couple of times in September. So go check it out and make sure that you come see us on the road if we come to your area. Now, Monique's not with me today in studio. She had kind of a last minute quasi emergency that came up and needed to get something taken care of. But the show must go on. And so we will carry on in spite of her not being here, although we will definitely miss her voice. And I do want to thank our moderators who are in the chat tonight. I want to encourage you to engage in the chat during the premiere of this episode. If you have questions on the content or about resources from the Center for Biblical Unity, they are there to help you get connected and to resource you. So make sure that you engage in the chat with them there. I also want to encourage you to stay tuned through the whole show. We're going to have two very important announcements during the show that you're not going to want to miss. One of them is related to a class that Monique is teaching for students starting in September. And another one is a webinar for church leaders that Kevin is doing next month as well. So stay tuned for details about that. Okay, let's get into tonight's topic. It is going to be a firecracker of a show. It always is whenever we have Katy Faust on the show. Last time we had an amazing discussion, I think it was back in March, about the destructiveness of no-fault divorce. That is the show that you almost watched me cry on the air. There was a moment in the show, I don't know if you could detect it, but I came completely undone emotionally. And it was an absolutely fascinating discussion. It always is whenever we have Katy on. And today she is here to share her reflections on living in the afterglow of 10 years of the Obergefell decision. And if you don't know what the Obergefell decision is, it was the Supreme Court decision back in 2015, in June of 2015, that nationalized the recognition of gay marriage. And with that, I want to say, welcome, Katy Faust.
It's so good to be back with you again. And you know what? Sad that Monique's not here, but more talking time for me. So I guess
right.
There you go.
That's right. Well, for the two people watching who don't really know who you are, give us a quick intro about you and your ministry and why you started commenting so much on X about overturning Obergefell.
I'm Katy Faust. I'm an activist. For a while, I was like, I run a nonprofit, or, well, I just, believe in marriage and family. I'm like, I'll just tell it like it is. I'm an activist. I'm a total children's rights activist. I think that you should leave the kids alone. I think it all boils down to don't touch the kids. Obviously, there's all kinds of things going on in adults' world, in the marriage and family world, really big things like infertility or struggling marriages or same-sex attraction or gender confusion or all different kinds of things. And we want to be empathetic for people in those situations. We want to walk through them with those friends and family faithfully with the love of Christ. But in no situations does the adult feelings or longings or loss or identity or need for affirmation ever justify violating children's rights. And what are those rights? The number one right that children have, that all humans have, is their right to life. But the second natural right that we have, that is a pre-political right, is children have a right to be known and loved by the two people responsible for their existence, their own mother and father. So while there are, thank God, as far as I can tell, hundreds of organizations defending children's right to life, then before us, my nonprofit is the only nonprofit solely devoted to defending children's right to their mother and father. So that makes us probably some of the most public-facing opponents of things like no-fault divorce and IVF and surrogacy and gay marriage.
Yeah.
So if you Google Katy Faust, you're going to get all kinds of anti-cohabitation this, Elon Musk is a modern day polygamist that. You'll get an awful lot of stuff about reproductive technologies because we really feel like it's important for especially Christians to be clear-minded about that, because that is an area where mass amounts of children are being victimized. But we are also spearheading a national campaign, a national coalition to challenge gay marriage. So that is now sort of out in the open. You can go to undobergefell.com just to put your name in and follow what's happening, because we are building at this point and there is a lot more to come.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's great. And I do want to let people know that Katy is a special friend of the ministry. She is one of the ministries that is listed on the Center for Biblical Unity website as a recommended resource and trusted voice. So if she makes you mad, chances are we will too. And so we're all kind of in this advocacy
we're
together.
trigger buddies.
Yeah, exactly. So it has been 10 years since Obergefell, and we're going to kind of reflect on that. And I'm so glad that we're doing this show, because you've made some profound and important tweets, or posts, now we're calling them, on X. So let's get into that a little bit. I think that my take on 2015 is that there was not a lot of pushback by evangelical Christians to the Obergefell decision. I feel like we kind of rolled over and just accepted it. Now, I know that's an unpopular take, but that was my perception 10 years ago. And I have to admit that I was a little bit more into the whole kind of idea of Christians shouldn't say too much in public, and it's people's private lives, and just let them do what they do, and who's going to be harmed. I've evolved quite a bit in 10 years. I'm not sure most people are thinking about how gay marriage impacts children. So let's just start with that.
Well, I agree with you. The pushback that did exist in 2015, I thought was lame. Like, a lot of it was stuff that I'm like, okay, that's true, but it doesn't actually motivate me to lose my friends, which is really what was at stake back then. It was either you support gay marriage or you're awful, hateful, homophobic bigot. When the reality is pretty much every Christian and conservative really loves their gay family and friends and have demonstrated it and are willing to sacrifice and love the people in their life that disagree with them. I know this because I am one of those people. And I've also met hundreds of other conservatives and Christians who also love their gay family and friends, who serve and sacrifice for them. But that kind of emotional manipulation, I think, was really effective back in 2015. Now, I think the LGBTQ activists have so overplayed their hand that people are like, you know what? I'm out. I tried to be as nice as I could, but you guys just couldn't stop. You were shoving it down our throats. It didn't stop with gay marriage. You know, it went on to the locker rooms and the dressing rooms and the pronouns and really the co-opting of like women's sports and all of that. So I think that, number one, people feel like they're a little more free to speak up now. All of the name calling has kind of lost its power. And we've been able to see some of the effects, that it really was not just a decision of, well, this is just the private life of two men or two women. The truth is that this has had a society-wide impact, not just because of the T, which kind of overtook the L, the G, and the B, but there has been an utter transformation in the legal space as it relates to marriage and family. And there were some of us who said before gay marriage was legalized that when you redefine marriage, you redefine parenthood. When you make husbands and wives optional in marriage, mothers and fathers become optional in parenthood. Now, that's a problem because the law can say that mothers and fathers are optional, but for children, they never are. So that's what we do. Then before us, we talk a lot about the impact and the harms of mother and father loss. And unfortunately, we're seeing that ramped up over the last 10 years. And now we're seeing it legally endorsed, you know, state by state and in a variety of different statutes.
Yeah, and I think that we were told 10 years ago that redefining marriage would have certain benefits, like people being able to go to the hospital rooms for their loved ones, or inheritance issues, or home ownership, or these sorts of things, and that this will fix that problem. And I am not convinced that that's really what any of this was actually about. That it's had a far more, I mean, people who talked about the slippery slope 10 years ago and who said, this is just going to open the door for a lot of sexual chaos. Those people were kind of ridiculed and marginalized as being extremists. The gay community kind of told us that that wasn't going to happen and that's not what would be. But here we are a decade later. How have things actually played out?
Well, the sexual chaos has definitely arrived, and a lot of people can see it. You can see it in the drag queen story hours. You can see it in the comprehensive sexual education that is spreading all throughout our public schools, even down to kindergartners. So, all of the cultural effect has sort of been hard to avoid. But I think the things that are, I think, even more damaging have been harder to see. And it's things that we obviously are aware of it them before us because we are working with our state level allies to try to fight some of the different legal overhauls that have been taking place on the ground as it relates to marriage and family laws that have been a direct result of gay marriage. And it's not something a lot of people know about. So just, a few examples. Um, when you say, like, what did Justice Kennedy say when he wrote his opinion in Obergefell? He said that same sex couples cannot be denied the constellation of benefits that go along with marriage. Now, maybe what he was thinking, and certainly what a lot of the activists were trying to say, is just what you said. We want tax benefits. We want to be able to visit our partners in the hospital. We want to be able to have joint home ownership. Okay, I actually think some of those are legitimate, and all of them could be accomplished without marriage. What kind of constellation of benefits go along with marriage? Children. Children do. Because throughout our common law tradition and really in the cultural imagination, marriage and children go together. They had to argue based on a non-procreative definition of marriage to get gay marriage to begin with. They had to argue saying, well, marriage has nothing to do with children. I mean, there's lots of heterosexual couples that don't have kids. And if they don't have kids, then maybe gay marriage can happen without kids. So then we passed this new law on the understanding that marriage is not necessarily a procreative union. And then they turned around and they said, okay, give us kids. Since we can't be denied the constellation of benefits, and because marriage has to do with children, now based on our non-procreative definition of marriage, we want you to give us children. So now, because there could be no distinctions between homosexual couples and heterosexual couples, the law had to accomplish what biology prohibits. And that is making two people of the same sex parents of a child. So now, if two men are going to be treated equally as a man and a woman in a marital union, these two guys need to have the same access to children as the man and the woman. And that requires a total legal overhaul. So I can get into that if you want.
No, I think, immediately what's coming to my mind is a very controversial post you made a couple of years ago when Dave Rubin, who is a homosexual and a political conservative commentator, we'll call him that, libertarian/conservative. He made a post that he and his partner were expecting two children. It was basically a birth announcement. And the whole conservative universe came on there and said, congratulations. Katy Faust came on there and started talking about the impact on the children. And I think that it's important for us to make very clear and plain what you see as the impact on children for in that situation. Dave Rubin seems like a perfectly nice guy. He's a quote unquote conservative. He has probably a loving partner. So what's the big deal? You're not, why can't you just be happy for these people? What's the matter with you?
Yeah. Why can't you be happy for these people? Well, because they're destroying the rights of children. That's why. Generally, I'm a very, very nice woman. I really like go along to get along. On the scale of like agreeability, I'm like an 85% out of 100 until you come for the kids. And then I can go a little postal, to be honest. And that was one of those situations where you had, and I would say what was interesting about the Dave Rubin announcement is a lot of the big name conservatives, the major platforms were congratulating him. But the normie Christians and the ordinary conservatives are like, excuse me, I'm sorry. I thought that we liked the family. I thought that we were down with the traditional values. I thought that you, PragerU, were the ones making videos.
Because there was a
saying, "Honor your mother
representative
and
from
father."
PragerU who came on there
Yeah.
with the congratulations, but it was you and Allie Beth who really were like,
Nope.
I have a different point of view here.
Yeah. And it's the child's point of view. So what do children need? To whom do they have a natural right? They have a natural right to be known and loved by the two people responsible for their existence. Why does that matter? And I'll give you the quick breakdown. Number one, because only those two adults grant something that children crave, and that is their biological identity. It is very hard for children to answer the question, who am I? If they cannot answer the question, whose am I? And Dave and his husband, David Janet's children, are missing 50% of the piece when they ask that question, who am I? They'll be like, well, this kid is the son of Dave Rubin, and this girl is the daughter of David Janet. But that guy doesn't really have anything to say about my genetic identity. And somebody out there is the other half of me. And so we know that children conceived through a third party, somebody else's sperm or somebody else's egg, suffer disproportionately from identity struggles because no duh. This is the very reason why we have absolutely reoriented our adoption best practice in this country away from what overwhelmingly used to be closed adoptions to now 95% of adoptions in the United States are open because even adopted children want to have the answer to that question, who am I, even if they can't be raised by their biological parents. So adopted experts understand that. But the world of reproductive technologies actually prefers anonymous arrangements because it's a little less complicated for the adults. So number one, biology matters to kids as it relates to their identity. And Dave and David's children have lost that. Number two, statistically, and we've studied family structure for decades, we don't have questions about this, but a child's own biological mother and father are statistically the safest, most connected to, most invested in, and most protective of them. Conversely, an unrelated adult sharing living spaces, especially a man, always increases risk of abuse and neglect, which is why, unfortunately, we are seeing more and more headlines about children being raised by two men who have suffered sickening and egregious abuse. Because biologically, at least one of those men is not wired to see that child as something around which they should protect and provide. Rather, it is something to be exploited. And that's actually not a knock on gay people. It is a fact of biology that, according to sociologist Brad Wilcox, the most dangerous place a child can find themselves in the country today is in the home of an unrelated man left to care for him themselves. That's it. This is a biological problem. It's not even a gay problem. It is a unrelated male in the home problem. So number one, when two children are being raised by two men, number one, they're missing some of their biological identity, half of it. Number two, they're separated from a parent that is demonstrably invested and connected to them and raised by a parent who will always increase risk of abuse and neglect. And number three, they're being starved of the maternal love and input that maximizes their development and satisfies their soul. It does not matter how effeminate a man is. He does not behave like a mother. He doesn't act like a mother, and he does not satisfy the child's longing for a mother. And if you want a deeper dive into this, you can go see my conversation with Jordan Peterson, where obviously he, because Jordan has a lot of experience with touching grass as it relates to the human experience, he agreed, yeah, mothers can't be replaced, even by freezers full of breast milk and on-demand nannies all through the night and maternal figures. Like, mothers are primal and primary to children. So when you look at it from the child's perspective, you can say it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, how good of a parent you are, whether or not you can diaper a child better than I can, which maybe they do. What matters is the fundamental rights of that child. And in the case of those two gentlemen, they have denied their children those rights.
Hi, this is Kevin Briggins, Director for the Center for Biblical Unity, and we would like to invite all pastors and church leaders to a free webinar where we discuss how to lead your church through race and justice issues. One thing I've learned through my years in ministry is that these topics can be difficult in today's polarized culture and with various voices pulling congregants in many different directions. This is why we at the Center for Biblical Unity believe in equipping pastors to shepherd their flocks faithfully through these issues. We also believe it is important that we as Christians address race and justice from a biblical worldview. So join us September 9th as we discuss ways in which you can disciple your church on these issues while staying faithful to a biblical worldview. If this is something you believe is important, please register and also share it with someone else within your circles. Until then, grace and peace.
What we're seeing and hearing in the culture is the only thing that matters is, families come in all shapes and sizes, and it just matters that they have loving parents, and we're not going to get caught up in the sex or gender of the parents as long as there's loving parents in the home. In fact, you did a friendly debate recently on the Josh Zepp's show. I think that's how you say his name. My apologies, Josh, if I said it wrong. But I really want people to watch this debate. I'm going to include it in the description below. And I want to encourage people to take the time to go watch it because I texted you right after I watched it. And I just told you, I thought you did a phenomenal job. We need more of this kind of public conversation. It was civil. It was respectful. You guys had sharp disagreements. His questions were really, really good. Your answers were compelling. I really appreciated the whole thing from end to end. But one of the things that came up was this whole idea of gay parenting, and is it enough just to have two loving parents? I'm going to play a little clip here, and then I'd love to have you react to it and, maybe add to the comment of some things that maybe you even didn't get to say in the interview. So we're going to watch like a 5-minute clip here on this conversation, and then we'll hear from you.
2023, BMJ Global Health. The paper was called Family Outcome Disparities Between Sexual Minority and Heterosexual Families, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis.
Was that the Italian?
That's Zhang, Wang, Wang, Zhu, Tan, Tian. So I'm guessing not Italian.
Okay.
A weird cluster of Italians.
Sorry,
no significant differences in physical health or education outcomes. Is this the one that
is this the sort of overview of a variety of different?
It says systematic review and meta-analysis, so that would be a meta. Yeah. Okay. 2020, Merezki, DeWitt, and Caboo in the American Sociological Review called School Outcomes of Children Raised by Same-Sex Parents, Evidence from Administrative Panel Data.
Is that the one? Is that Netherlands? Is that the Scandinavian?
No, that's not the Scandinavian one, I don't think, because I've got that one as well. Okay. Children raised by same-sex parents perform better in school compared to those raised by different sex parents.
Sorry, what study was that? Is that the Netherlands one?
That's American Sociological Review.
Oh, okay.
In 2020. 2016 study in Pediatrics, the journal, Children of Same-Sex Parents are just as healthy and well-adjusted as those of heterosexual parents. Mm-hmm. The American Psychological Association, the Australian Psychological Association, and the Canadian Psychological Association have all independently concluded that children's well-being does not vary based on parents' sexual orientation. The 2017 study by Farr, entitled Does Parental Sexual Orientation Matter? A longitudinal follow-up of adoptive families with school-aged children in the Journal of Developmental Psychology. The Journal of Child Development by Patterson, Children of Lesbian and Gay Parents. There's another study from 2022 that compared children aged 6 to 16 with same-sex parents to their peers with different sex parents, which found no significant differences in areas like social adjustment, emotional adjustment, or general behavioral problems. The University of Melbourne in 2014, that's going back, found that children of same-sex parents scored higher on measures of general health and family cohesion compared to the general population. In Pediatrics Journal in 2020, a review concluded that children of same-sex parents are just as healthy and well-adjusted as those of heterosexual parents. There's the Pew Research Center study in 2025. And so do you want to just Tell me why all those are wrong.
Some of them are distinct studies, and some of them are capturing, some of them are recaps of, okay, let me go back. Up until about 2005, there was a consensus in the sociological world that children fared best when they were raised by their married biological mother and father in a low conflict marriage. That is what everybody on the left and the right would say until 2005. Why? Because if you look at data and common sense, obviously, the two people responsible for the existence of the child are going to be the most connected to, invested in, and protective of them. You can look at that from an evolutionary perspective.
Usually.
100%. I'll grant you some edge cases. Edge cases where...
I mean, some people give up their child.
Yes, some people abuse... Some biological people abuse their children. Yeah. Horrible. Okay. So, but on the whole, when you look at kind of the pantheon of human relationships, married, biological, mother and father in a low conflict relationship. That was the consensus among all sociologists.
And where and in what circumstances are we taking children out of that environment to put them into same-sex households?
Well, I'd say culturally, legally, and technologically, we've absolutely overhauled things to do exactly that. But we can get to that after we test the data.
There is no universe in which children who would otherwise be brought up in a heterosexual family with biological parents are not getting that,
because
they're getting something else.
Because we've created systems where we can design and purchase and legally extract children from their genetic mother or father through the combination of reproductive technologies and overhauling our parenthood laws.
Only when that mother and father were not going to raise that child.
Sure. So we've said it's okay to sell your children, and I actually don't think that that's
Well, I mean, we can talk about the commercial side of things,
right?
But that's a distinct question from here is this ideal family,
and we're not
giving the children that ideal family.
Sure.
There is no universe in which the children who were going to have that ideal family are being taken away and raised by same-sex families or
okay. That's one way to think about it. The other way is we are now manufacturing and in some places incentivizing the creation of motherless or fatherless children. Do you think that's true? That we have created systems that incentivize or permit people to create motherless or fatherless children?
Yes, it depends on if your strict definition of mother and father is the biological, the person who produced the sperm and the person who produced the egg, then that's undeniably true.
Yes. And I would say mothers and fathers are more than that, but they're not less than that.
Okay, I know it was a longer clip, but he summarized a lot of research there, and maybe you can just kind of give some reaction to some of that data, because really what he's trying to do is just marshal the case that all you need is two loving parents.
Yeah. Well, I actually wrote about this interview in a Substack that I did a week or two ago called My 5 Biggest Regrets after I've started a nonprofit. And one of them was, in that interview, I had so many opportunities to corner him. But he moved from one thing to another, and I'm like a shiny object. Oh, you want to talk about this now? Well, let's talk about this now. If we had just held there, what I should have said when he goes through the list is, a lot of junk studies does not make for a solid consensus. And just because you have the American Psychological Association, the Canadian, they're summarizing data that is subpar. And another couple weeks ago, I was on a plane sitting on a tarmac, and what had just come out? Oh my gosh, the story of the guy who had procured the surrogate-born child, and the video of him and his partner kissing the baby every month for the first 12 months of the baby's life went viral. And then they found out that the guy was a convicted sex offender.
Right.
And so people were asking Grok, hey, Grok, what are the outcomes for children with same-sex parents? And Grok was spitting out every single thing that Josh Zepps was spitting out, because there's so many studies that suck. And Grok is just pulling from everything that's on the web. But just because you've got low quality studies, that does not overturn the consensus of what sociologists have always recognized, which is that a child's own married biological mother and father in a low conflict relationship is the best foundation for child thriving. That is what sociologists on the left and right used to say. So all that to say, he can list all the different studies. I mean, there's 75 he could have listed. There's this study here, there's that study here. And a lot of them, like I said, are summaries of one data set spun in different ways. Even one of the ones that he mentioned, the Patterson study that supposedly showed that children do even better in school. Well, Paul Solons actually looked at the criteria they used, and Patterson mischaracterized several of the children. He named the ones, there were several that were actually raised by heterosexual couples that he put in the same-sex couple basket. Once he properly categorized and took out the heterosexual couples, he found that the children of same-sex couples had higher anxiety and did worse in school. And so I did not come as prepared. I actually had 24 hours to prepare for that interview. I didn't know what was going to happen. It would have been better for me to have known something about all 75 of those studies, so I could have asked the question right there on the spot and correct him. And I wasn't ready for that. So that's a regret. But also, I think that what you see there is we were talking about studies, but then he switches it and he goes, okay, but there's no children that are being raised by heterosexual couples who were taken from their heterosexual parents, right? I mean, he tries to frame it as nobody's stealing these children.
Right.
And in that sense, this is another example, kind of like the Dave Rubin example. Do not let the other side frame the debate. The debate is not, are children being violently removed from their heterosexual parents and given to homosexual parents? The question is, do children have a right to their mother and father? Should they be separated from that mother and father consensually, intentionally, and technologically, and often commercially, even if the mother or father consents to it, which almost all of them do? The question is, should there be a marketplace for children? And should our laws affirm and validate the intentional loss of a child's mother or father? That is the proper way to think about this kind of question. And so, it really was sort of like a battle of worldviews. If you go through that whole interview, it's just a battle of worldviews, where he's like, but if you frame it this way, you get this shiny thing. And I'm like, but if you frame it this way, you've got child buying and child selling taking place. So anyway, it's just, I look at that whole interview and I'm like, civil conversation. I think he was very respectful. I think if you look at the YouTube comments, the people who are kind of on my side, they're like, oh, she totally won. And the people on his side are like, oh, he totally won. I'm like, well, that's probably a good debate where both sides feel like they were accurately represented. Yeah. But I look back at that and I'm like, Katy, why can't you not be distracted by shiny objects? That's all I see when I look at that interview.
So is your position then that the scientific research doesn't really bear out the claim that all a child needs is two loving adults, two loving parents? It doesn't matter what sex and gender they are. Is your contention that the studies that are frequently pointed to are either not designed properly or not interpreted correctly, or there's some fatal flaw in the study? Is that your claim?
They're not designed properly.
Okay.
And Zeps even admitted that. He said, well, a lot of these studies don't use, like you mentioned, they don't use random participants. They're not large sample sizes. They're largely recruited mothers and fathers. And, and in addition, they're usually self-reported, where the parents are saying of their 7-year-old, my child loves this, they're doing great, which is very different than evaluating that child as a 27-year-old, asking, have they ever experienced depression or anxiety? Were they on an IEP at school? Did they experience sexual abuse? Were they ever on any kind of antidepressants? I mean, those are two very different metrics to use. Like, how does the parent think they're parenting versus how did the child actually experience their life growing up? Okay, so there's a lot of problems with that methodology. And actually, if you go again to our Substack, I kind of recount this conversation that I had with Grok because I was like, Grok, look, you're spitting out all of this junk. There was lots of junk science that produced a junk consensus. But I was like, Grok, if you take those 79 studies or, 82 studies or whatever, and you only gave me the studies where there was random participants, they actually evaluated the outcomes of children, not the self-reporting of adults. They had adequate control groups. The sample size was large enough to extrapolate to a population-wide set. How many studies are we talking about? And Grok's like, 5. And then I was like, okay, well, tell me about these other 3 studies, Grok, that were kind of pre-2005. What did those 3 studies find? And they're like, oh, those 3 studies found that children with same-sex parents actually suffer. They don't do as well. And I'm like, Grok, why don't people include those studies. And they're like, oh, because the sample sizes are too small, and because they didn't use random participants, and because they didn't evaluate the actual outcomes of kids. It was more adult self-reporting. I'm like, I see. So you're throwing out these studies that show that children with same-sex parents fare worse, but you're keeping these studies that say they fare better, even though they're both tainted by the same poor methodologies. And Grok's like, yeah, I guess that is a problem. And I was like, Grok, tell me, and this is a point I also made with Josh Sepps, tell me, whenever researchers are not studying same-sex parenting, don't they all agree that biological parents invest more, are connected more, and more protective of kids, that unrelated adults increase risk of abuse and neglect, that mothers and fathers offer distinct and complementary benefits to children, that losing a mother or father to death, divorce, abandonment, or reproductive technologies is harmful? Isn't that what sociologists agree on when they're not looking at same-sex parenting? Grok. And Grok was like, yes, that is true. All of those things are true. And I said, okay, Grok, then tell me why you suddenly had 10 or 15 years of sociologists going, actually, there's no difference. Did human nature change, Grok? Or was there massive amounts of bias within academia where you could say they were ideologically captured? Is that probably the more plausible explanation, Grok? And Grok's like, yeah, that's actually what happened. There was so much money and influence that researchers felt like they can't be honest. I was like, okay, thanks. Thanks. Now, that did not permanently change Grok, because I saw other people asking questions like, how do kids with same-sex parents feel?
Yeah.
Below my thread. And Grok's like, they do great. 79 studies showed that overall or sexual orientation of parents doesn't have blah, 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 blah. So all that to say, the research showing that children with same-sex parents faring no different, all of those come from studies that don't have, not all of them. There's one or two maybe that use good methodologies that show that there's no difference, or maybe that on some of them, their academics are better, but the vast majority show a serious detriment to kids with same-sex parents. And that is the logical conclusion, because two adults of the same sex can never both be biologically related. And that tends to be the place where you find the safeguards for child protection, child thriving, and child development.
It does make me ask some questions about whether or not the academic literature is kind of rigged in terms.
It's rigged.
Yeah.
Like, it is rigged. Like, there's no other way to put it. It is rigged. The Heritage Foundation actually did in 2015 kind of a diagnostic of all the different studies. And they said 0 studies that used random participants found that the kids are doing fine. You have to recruit a certain participant to get the outcome that you want. That is called rigged.
It makes me wonder if you could even get a study published that didn't get the accepted results, and what obstacles those researchers might face, or whether there are researchers that can get grants to probe and put together a study in a more unbiased way. It just makes me have a lot of questions. I used to work with scientists for 20 years. And so these are the kind of thoughts that pop into my mind.
You're right to have questions.
Yeah.
And no, these kinds of things couldn't get funded through a typical university.
Yeah.
It would take an independent funding source. And then, of course, if you come out showing what is obviously true, that there's going to be some detrimental impact, everyone would say, oh, well, it was a Catholic university that funded it. So, yeah. And you know what? Like, we actually used to have, for example, child abuse incident reports collected by government data every 10 years. We haven't had any of that since 2010. I think that they are just hesitant to report any family structure difference at all, because it always proves the superiority of the natural family.
So when we're thinking about people who might bring up what you call in that debate edge cases, they might say, well, I know somebody who was raised by gay parents and they're perfectly fine, or that traditional families, they abuse their children too. There's no difference. I think you did a really good job in the debate of differentiating between these are the things that are the most likely to be true and edge cases. Can you just talk to us a little bit strategically how you navigate that in a conversation to keep the conversation on track and not feeling like you have to answer each and every edge case?
It's so interesting. I'm not going to say I'm like Jesus or anything, but my youngest and I were watching The Chosen last night, and it was the episode where the Pharisees challenged Jesus, and they're like, taxes or no taxes, right? And they're trying to pull him off course. And so you answer the edge case by first recognizing the rule. You first establish the rule, and the rule is there are some things that belong to Caesar, but there's a hell of a lot that belongs to God. And so first you land on the rule, establish the rule, see if there's agreement on the rule, and then you can address the edge case. But typically what the other side is going to do is they're going to first appeal to the edge case. And the edge cases tend to be the more morally complex, right? In the abortion debate, it's the what about rape and incest? Well, that's an edge case. It's less than 1% of all crisis pregnancies. And yet that's the one they're going to go to first because it can be morally murky. Whereas the more typical scenario where it is a woman who had consensual sex and she is afraid or doesn't want to interrupt her career plans or is worried that she's not going to be able to graduate from college and it's a completely elective surgery and the child's 5 months along or something like that. I mean, we look at that and we're like, that doesn't look very murky to me. And that's much more the rule of people that are seeking abortions, maybe not the 5-month thing. Typically it's under 12 weeks, but that's more the rule is that it tends to be elective. It doesn't tend to be as morally complex as rape or incest. And yet people that are engaged in these debates will more often go to the edge cases because it's more problematic. So I just say I can address the edge cases because they exist. Abusive biological parents exist. Children who are living in an orphanage who maybe aren't able to be adopted by anybody except a single adult or a same sex, that exists. But I'll go there. Like, you want to know where John's baptism, or you want to know by what authority I do this? Okay, fine. Tell me where John's baptism comes from. First, establish the rule. And if they're not going to get in with you on the rule, then don't even bother with the edge cases because they're not there having an honest debate.
That's a good tip. I think of that when you're having discussions about gender issues, they always bring up the intersex people first.
Right. That's a perfect edge case example.
It's like, okay, but that's not really what we're talking about, but we can talk about intersex people, but that doesn't.
But first, let's talk about how you know whether or not something is male or female.
Exactly.
First, define how scientists determine biological sex. What is it? And if they're like, well, I don't want to talk about that, you can be like, well, then neither will I answer you about the intersex.
Hey, do you have a teen who is very curious about justice? Or are you looking to help empower and equip your teen to be able to have well thought out, biblically based, Christ-centered thoughts on justice? If so, check out our new Scripture and Society class that is geared just toward teens, ages 14 to 19 years old. We will hold these classes starting September 11th on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Pacific. What we're going to do is go through 2 books, Booker T. Washington's Up From Slavery and Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be a Young Anti-Racist. We are going to look at these books, compare and contrast them, but most importantly, we're going to hold them up against the mirror of Scripture to find out, how does Scripture talk about justice? How should we treat one another, the fellow image bearer? And what is the better path for human flourishing? For more information about our teen class, Scripture and Society, please go to centerforbiblicalunity.com to find out more information or to register. Thanks.
So our kids are now growing up in the post-Obergefell world. I mean, it's been the law of the land for 10 years now. I don't know. There's some chatter that the Supreme Court may pick it up next month and revisit it. But the reality is that we're living in that world. Our kids are living in that world. Do you have any thoughts about discipleship and talking to our kids about, hey, the fact that this happens and the fact that this is legal, for lack of a better term, right now in our country, that doesn't make it right. And the difference between something being right and being legal, sometimes those things are not the same thing. Maybe you could share with us some kind of discipleship thoughts from a parenting perspective.
Well, unfortunately, there's been all kinds of injustices throughout the history of our country that have been totally legal. Slavery, Jim Crow, abortion. There's all kinds of things that we have said. There's a civil law that allows for this, but it goes against the natural law. And that is the case with gay marriage. There might be a civil law saying that two men can get married, but it goes against the natural law that children come from a mother and father. And marriage is the mechanism that not only our country, but every other civilization throughout history has used to unite the two people to whom children have a natural right. So what is it that we need to do? Well, the coalition that I'm working for is going to do three things. Number one, it is going to create a genuine judicial pathway for success, where we will force the court to reconsider whether or not it's plausible to recognize gay marriage and advance the truth that children have a mother and father, deserve a mother and father, benefit from being raised by that mother and father, and have a natural right to that mother and father. So we need a judicial strategy. Number two, we need to change public opinion. Public opinion on this issue is falling among Republicans precipitously. It went from 55% down to 41% in a matter of 2 years, largely unchanged in the world of libertarians and Democrats. But that's genuinely because people think, well, this is just about two adults. They don't understand the impact that it has had on children. A lot of them are seeing the gay couple, one of whom is a convicted sex offender who has acquired a surrogate child, and go, oh my gosh, this is awful.
Well,
We need to connect the dots between that and gay marriage, and the dots are only one hop away from each other.
Well, yeah, and I wrote on X, I tagged you in a couple of posts of like, Katy Faust has been screaming about this for years. And people
Yeah.
were acting like it was completely new information to them that
How did this happen?
uh,
Where did this come from?
that a pedophile could somehow get their hands on a child through surrogacy. And I'm like, Katy Faust, you're not paying attention. I think I even tagged you in a couple posts like to congressmen who were acting surprised. I'm like, you're not talking to the right people. And
No.
this is what happens when we center the needs of the adults in the situation and their happiness rather than thinking about the world through the lens of the child.
Yeah. And your original question, which was very good, that I went on a huge tangent, is how do we talk to kids about this? And the third part of our effort to challenge gay marriage is we're going to make materials for the church. We're going to, between you and me and your fantastic audience, I've got Rosaria Butterfield, Sean McDowell, John Stonestreet, and Albert Moeller, among others, on my working group for people that are going to develop curriculum for churches to talk about why marriage is actually a matter of justice for children.
Mhm.
Even though you grew up, 15-year-old, and you don't remember a world where we believed in traditional marriage, it doesn't mean that this should remain the same. It actually means it needs to be overturned. And you, the church, are actually the people that God has put on the earth to defend children. Every country throughout every century that the church has existed does two things. They piss adults off and they protect children. In every country, they confront female genital mutilation. They confront Chinese foot binding. They confront infanticide. They confront child labor violations and create child labor laws. They start orphanages in every single country that they are in. There is something deeply connected from the Christian worldview to elevating the rights and well-being of children. And God's plan A for child protection is marriage.
Yeah.
So you, the church, have a duty to protect children. We, Christians, are the people who are mandated with protecting the fatherless. Gay marriage manufactures the fatherless. So whose side are you on? The answer has to be the kids.
I really hope that there's pastors listening to this, listening to your courage, that will start tackling these conversations in their pulpits and stop thinking, oh, this is too political. That no, this is part of justice. This is a justice conversation, justice for children, justice for the fatherless. I want to commend pastors. If you are not already following Katy on social media and her work at Them Before Us, to fix that immediately and introduce your people to her work and what she is up to. And again, if you don't like what Katy has to say, um, you're probably not going to like what Monique and I are up to either, because our ministries are very similar. We're fighting for justice on different fronts and on the same front. We are there trying to help sharpen each other and encourage each other and equip and train each other, each in our respective areas of expertise. And so, Katy, last question is, if Christians don't get engaged and we are passive and we think, well, it's just a private situation, it's not really our business, we shouldn't legislate our morality, what will be that impact for the next generation and for our grandchildren?
We're going to make children in factories. That's what's happening. That's where we're headed. And it's not just going to be children made in factories. It is going to be children made in factories subsidized by your tax dollars and your insurance premiums. It will be children who are customized through things like ORCID, which can genomically screen the child for 1,200 different characteristics, so you can edit out the ones that are dealing with possible premature baldness or more prone to blindness or maybe more prone to eczema. You will be able to create a designer child. We already have that happening now. We already have marketplaces of donor sperm and donor egg, which is just purchasing egg and purchasing sperm, that you can take advantage of now. We already have commercial processes to rent the wombs of women, and that is going to be a lot easier. China says that they have an artificial womb that they are going to start using in 2026. It does not get better from here. If you cannot fundamentally defend the rights of children, their right to life and their right to their mother and father, you are talking about some of the most dystopic scenarios. You think that you're concerned about child trafficking now? Just wait. Just wait until you've got factory floors of ectopic ectogenesis, in vitro gametogenesis tanks where we're breeding children, and robot nannies get to decide whether or not you increase or decrease their nutrition and their oxygen levels. I mean, that is where we are headed. It is not going to be that long from now. So whose side are you on? You can be on the side of children, and you probably are going to pay a social cost, or you can keep your friends, and children are going to be victimized, and you will answer to your Lord for that. Because this is not an option for Christians, especially. Like, this is millstone territory. You have to decide, whose side are you on? And the Christian's answer always has to be, I am on the side of the children.
With that, I'm going to say thank you, Katy, for making time to have this very important conversation with us. And we appreciate you very much.
Well, I love the Center for Biblical Unity. And I love when all your stuff pops up on social media. And if you guys are not subscribed to this channel, do it. And if you're not donating to their ministry, you also need to do that, because there is nobody else in the space doing what Monique and Krista are doing. And they really, really deserve your support.
Thank you very much. See, I told you it was going to be a great conversation. Lots of amazing content that Katy brings to any discussion. I hope you found it helpful. Make sure to check the description for further resources. And I do want to let you know that All the Things is sponsored by the Center for Biblical Unity. And we are here because of the generous support of people just like you. We are not funded by a big industrial complex or a big foundation. We are funded by regular people who give to this ministry because they believe in the work that we're doing, and they want to keep Monique and Kevin and I deployed in ministry as much as possible. And we are so grateful to those of you who financially partner with us. But if you do not financially partner with us currently, we want to encourage you to go check out our donation page and find out more about our work and what we're up to. And we would love it if you would prayerfully consider and ask the Lord about whether or not you might be a part of our support system. We love it when people pray for us, and we love the fact that we see your engagement online and in the comments. But financial support is vital to keep this ministry going. And we would love it if you would come and partner with us, link arms with us as we fight for biblical unity and biblical justice in this time of cultural chaos and confusion. And we will see you in 2 weeks. We're going to be having a conversation with Dr. Joe Rigney about his book on empathy and really trying to probe the question of, are there times when empathy can actually become sinful? It's a very provocative question. Many people are talking about it on social media, and we want to explore it in some detail. So we will see you then. Have a good week, and God bless.
There's nothing